Sure, go ahead. It's so weird to have Wi-Fi. It's so weird to have Wi-Fi issues because I'm like, what? I never have Wi-Fi issues, but it is a storm. So
Yeah,
what can
it
we
is
do?
like raining really
Meeting being
bad
recorded.
here in Ganja. Is it raining up there?
It's kind of, I'm in the storm.
How are you
I
doing?
can like tell, like,
Oh,
I'm good. Like when the storm is on the horizon, I'll be like, okay, 15 minutes, it'll be here. Like I can see it coming.
how was Kashmir? How
How
was
are you?
time? I'm good.
Kashmir was really, really like grounding, like because I've studied like Indus Valley a lot, and I guess I'd never been able to be in that area. Just like touching the Indus River was like very, very spiritual and exciting. My mom and my dad were with me, and it was just a really good. It was quick though. It was like 4 days. I was like fly in, 18,000 elevation, fly out. I was like, wow.
Yeah, yeah. But
I went to,
it was nice.
I went to
Were you able to turn off a little bit?
Oh, of course. Yeah, the phones just did not work. So it was just like I only
Yeah,
got to
same
check my
here.
phone at
My
night.
phone didn't work either when I was up there.
It was just off. Yeah, it was just off. And I was cool with that. I just had a lot of observations. I felt like every single good looking man in India was in the army and they were all stationed there. I was like, my God, look at him. Look at him. My mom was like stressed. I'm like, oh, wow.
So
Day
funny.
in. Like, wow.
All right. Okay. On that note, Raja, I'm going to pivot a little bit.
Of
So I think I
course.
told you a little bit already about what we're doing. We're launching a little microzine as a part of a new capsule that's going out. And we are
Mhm.
trying to understand what the relationship of India looks like for a lot of artists. And we're kind of asking a few different questions. So I'm just gonna try to make this a 30-minute conversation and ask you a few different
Mhm.
things. Be as open-ended as you would like, as concise as you want. I'll leave it to you. And we,
Oh, 1 second. There's a weird banging sound. I just want to see if it's like a wind related thing.
yeah, no worries.
Okay. Okay. Everything's closed. Okay. Because I had the windows open and I'm like, there's a full on storm. It sounded like something was like, "Duk, duk." Okay, anyways.
All
Yes,
good? Okay,
ready.
great, great.
No confusions now.
So Raja, tell me a little bit more about your childhood and how you got into the music space. You told me a little bit when we last hung out, but I would love to. And it was just very interesting to talk about philanthropy, and there's so many different dimensions to that story. So if you can maybe share that entire journey with me again.
Of course. So I guess I was start my story with my parents. My dad is one of 8 kids and the only one that went to medical school. And I always ask him like, what made you move to America? And he said there was this guiding force that just kept giving him opportunities, and he just kept going. It was never like a dream of his. And I always think about that because my dad took like one flight over and like changed like the course of like our family. And as a young girl growing up in America, my parents really, I feel like anyone that left in the 70s left with this like time capsule of Indian culture. And in some ways, in the diaspora, I find that there's a lot of study of the classical arts, and there's a lot of like trying to hold on, to those types of expressions of culture because that was like what they had. So my mom wanted to be a dancer. She couldn't do it when she was growing up because classical dance is a very expensive kind of hobby. And, that was what they wanted. And before I even came, it was already like decided they wanted a daughter that would dance. So since I was a young girl, I was really watching a lot of South Indian film that was like, there's a lot of classical dance in the older films. So I would watch like classical dancers and I would watch like Madhuri Dixit and I would find this connection, with the culture because looking around in America, I always tell my friends in India, when you watch a commercial, the mom looks like your mom. Like there's some kind of validation and like understanding that comes from growing up around people like you, where it would be like so exoticized or made a joke or like it was a poo or something if there was an Indian person, So I feel like there was this desire to come back to India where I would belong in some way. But growing up in America, it was really a very beautiful necessity because I grew up in a place where at the time, we believe, so sorry, but there's no one else in the house. And if I don't open this, it's going to ring again.
No.
I apologize.
Okay. No way.
We're going to come right back. And I tell the story all the time. So I got
Okay.
you. Hold on. My bad. My parents just came home from Jersey. I'm back. Okay. My parents just walked in. I thought it was a delivery. Okay. Let me bring you back to a place that can be edited in. Hold on. Let me start. Okay. So I feel like growing up in America, like not being able to see, people like me, it made me hold really tight to the culture.
Right.
And I grew up learning Indian classical dance.
Okay.
And I was really lucky, like out of all the, out of all the experiences I'd seen around me, like you would learn from someone who learned from someone who like went to India for the summer, where my mom, manifestor she is, she found the guru that she wanted to learn from as a child. And literally she moved into our house and she taught me like 6 hours a day from when I was like 7 years old. So there was this connection with the culture, this obsession. Like when other people were thinking about like Batman or Superman, it was like Hanuman, Arjun, like Krishna, like these characters just like took over my mind because I was playing them, like I was holding the bow and arrow and I was dancing like Shiva. So they captivated me. And I think that love for classical dance is, the foundation for whatever I would do later, because basically through my philanthropy, like my parents were very much, they instilled in me that like, art is it's to give to God, and I would do these performances and we would raise thousands of dollars. Like as a kid, I wouldn't understand that like a performance was getting 25,000 in tickets or 80,000. And I remember the night that it was 80,000, which was the most I had ever kind of got from the public. Like, I went through all of my uncles and aunties and like was like, I need you to give a donation, and this Indic Foundation chair was to like instill someone that would teach Hinduism to all, the different colleges so that we could kind of control the narrative a little bit. And I remember after that performance, just feeling like after raising 80,000, it all went to operational costs,
Right.
instead of actually going to instill the chair. So I realized that like the platform for classical dance was limited. And I really wanted to do my part to show people how beautiful and important it was. And at the time I was like very influenced by American pop music, growing up in Los Angeles, I was watching NSYNC and Britney Spears. And that was the era that like I was learning all the dance moves. So there was really these two worlds that kind of met in that moment. And I decided like, well, if I was a pop star and I wanted to talk about Indic Foundation, like Justin Timberlake at the time was like, had mentioned this, it would have been funded before he left the stage. Like that was this dawning that came on me. And I was like, however cliche it sounds now when we're like, because it's not cliche, it's just all of us had these same vibrations. It's like I wanted to become the artist that I needed. Like I wanted this superhero Devi, like Amar Chitra Kada mixed with like Mahabharat character that, could defend how much I love my culture. It could stand in front of me and it wouldn't have to be me like explaining it, And
Raja, how old
dance, would,
how old were you when you had this moment?
I think I was about 14, which is around the time that I'd done my third Arangetram. Like I had Padma Shri gurus, sitting in the front row, and I had gotten the Kohinoor Award. And like, it was like this time period. I remember like whatever I would try to do, I would like win at it. And I didn't understand. There was a long period of 10 years where anything I did, I wouldn't win. And I was like, what is this life? That it was part of like the teaching of that time period about like the work ethic and what it took to like tour. I did a 15 city tour at 10 years old with an 8-piece orchestra and like, had all this exposure, but it just kept telling me that what was in India was real. It's not some fantasy world. There was this place that whenever I would be there and I would dance, I felt more like myself. Like I felt like people understood me or they could see what was in me that maybe people could see in America and were maybe making fun of me for, maybe I was hiding because of my insecurities. And I think around that time I started writing music. And it started with poetry. And then, I was very inspired by Lauryn Hill. And, I was very young when that album was given to me. My eldest brother, who's now like a neurosurgeon, he did the thing. He did the thing he was supposed to do. He gave it to me at a very young age, and he told me to learn the song Killing Me Softly. And of course, I listened to the rest of the album. I kept going, and it just really taught me so much about female power and like how Lauryn Hill could speak about knowledge and poetry and hold her own energy with two men in the group. And it just gave me a framework. And I feel like between being exposed to Lauryn Hill at a young age and being completely immersed in A.R. Rahman's music, I feel like that fusion, that space became apparent that if hip hop is sampling Indian music in the early 2000s and they can play a full song, like, why can't I be accepted in hip hop? And that like became this place, like it just resonated so deeply with me. It made so much sense. Like maybe it was the fact that it was born out of oppression and people wanting to like express themselves and whatever was happening in America. I felt like I always knew there was so much that went into my, freedom, whether it's like what my dad being born in 1955 or what happened in independence before that, or, how many generations before. I was very aware that as a woman, as a young girl, I had so much opportunity, and like there was something that I had to do with that. And the dream really, it's crazy. So I started making music, right? And I started making it for myself and figured it out. Like, okay, if I pay for a studio session, but then I realized you need more than one song. And like, I want to be doing this every day. So I started songwriting. I started writing for other people just so I could be in the studio every day. And through that, I kind of learned, like what was for me, what was for other people. I got to experience, my first platinum record, selling 1 million records with Fall Out Boy, and, getting a publishing deal and, legitimizing this music scene for my parents. Like once I met A.R. Rahman, like everything was okay. But it was really like coming to India for me was really like important because I got signed to Epic Records, like Sony Epic. And I was a small handful of people from South Asian, descent that were involved in the major labels in 2015. And, I got signed with all the excitement, the you can't leave the building until you sign it, the money in the bank the next day, studio, it was with all of that. And I made the album The Come. And in the process of making this, with the politics and power plays and all the things that I didn't know about, going in almost 10 years ago, there was also the politics of like race in some ways, because it was like, oh, well, we want Indian people to be exoticized and in this position, like hip hop is not like a space for you, which was very strange. And they wanted me to make like this like pop music, but I was like, no, hip hop is alive in India. Like I've seen the seeds of something real, and you're lucky you have me early. Like, why don't invest in this? So
Raja,
I went to India in 2016. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. So when you talk
Go
about
for it.
folk didn't immediately think that you could perform hip hop, was that folks in
Yes.
India, or were you hearing this from folks in the US?
I was in the US. Like for me, hold on, I don't know why the world is trying. Let me put do not disturb. I'm so sorry about today.
No, it's
It's
okay.
like I never get a phone call, and then like 16 things are going on. Where are you? There you go. See, in America, I realized I was facing like racism stuff. Like it was so bizarre. Like I remember them being like, Indian girls don't rap, and I'm like, but I'm here rapping in your face. In fact, an Indian girl, And there would be conversations like this was so obscure to me. In hip hop, like there's certain words that mean a lot of things. Like blow up a check means like I'm gonna go spend my money, right? And there was a song that had that lyric in it, like who's saying I won't blow up a check? Who's saying I'm gonna blow up a check? A little bit on the edge. It was a little bit like playing with like different Arabic words and Hindi words and stuff like that. But I was expecting them to be like kind of getting stuck on the word like who's saying, because it kind of sounded like Hussein. So I was like, okay. But they were stuck on blow up. Like they were like, I don't think a brown person should say blow up a check. And I was like shocked with the racism of that. I was like, I cannot believe the model minority Indians that have like run the like medical system. Like it was so interesting because I had grown up so sheltered to not really see how far, you know, things actually went. And that was such a strange experience sitting in a room with like executives all discussing whether it was okay for me to say that. And it was like, had nothing to do with what I was saying, you know? And there was even like an experience of like the budget was given to me for one of my larger music videos. And, you know, I had the opportunity to work with huge director who would require more budget. And I was trying to convince them, like, you know, it's a big one, we should do it. And they said, if you don't wear a bindi, we'll give you the budget, because I feel like bindi alienates people. And I'm like sitting here thinking about Selena Gomez, Gwen Stefani, Coachella. Like, how can an Indian woman wearing a bindi alienate people when it's perfectly suitable as a costume? So it
Right.
was like such a crazy experience, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my next question is, you've been very conscious about your experiences, and you've been digesting these different experiences and dissecting them. I mean, these are your living truths, right? In a way. But when you start looking at the way that people approach you as a South Asian American artist here in India, what does that baggage look like? Like what comes with that identity? And is there a conversation to be had around that?
It's very interesting. Like both places, I feel like in India, one of the main things that I had to like get acquainted with and figure a way around was the patriarchy. Like it is existent all over the world, but it was like remarkable kind of in the beginning, because it would be like, oh, I would like talk to directors like before I did Javan or before I did these films where I proved a female voice could, you know, carry a film. I'd be like, hey, you know, let me write this like big, epic, like anthemic hook, like Centuries, which I obviously was a part of in the past, you know. And he's like, well, the main character is a man. How could a woman do that? And I'm like,
Mm,
it was just so crazy, like some of the weird ways that they had kind of made decisions. But I think as an American, I kind of just came in without like any of the, I don't know. I just came in bulldozing through it. I was just like, no, this is how it is. I've seen the way things are done. And I think I had an advantage kind of coming in, you know, with whatever accolades that people in India would respect, you know, like that allowed me to kind of come in and do work at the level that I wanted to do work.
right.
It is weird though, because it's like, see, I would have said something different a year ago. And
Mm,
now I would say something different. I feel like a year ago, maybe because there's only one radio station that plays English music, or there's certain restrictions on English things. But
mm,
then now I'm feeling the flip side, where I'm getting calls from directors that are doing pan-Indian films that have films in Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and they
mm.
want the song in English because then they don't have to do 5 versions. And now all the years that like I kind of felt like I was left out of a lot of projects, now they're kind of tailored for me because they're coming to me for something that I've, you know, stuck to. But artists should grow. So I'm also trying to do different languages. But I think maybe being an American in India has been a benefit. And I feel like, but my issue is, as NRIs, should we come in and pillage and take and just stuff our bags and go home? Like just because they're giving me special treatment because I'm American, does that mean I just take it, take all the jobs and like run off? No, like there have been opportunities, like I've done like a Hershey's campaign and I did it with Meba Ophelia, and she's, you know, from the Northeast. I did a campaign with Absolute where I did something called Ronnie Cypher, and I brought in a rapper from Mumbai, DMC, from Karnataka, Theory, and again Meba Ophelia. So it's like I tried with acknowledging, you know, my hello mom, thank you, so sweet, thank you mom. um I tried to acknowledge you know, my what is the word I'm looking for?
I
You know
guess
what I'm talking about.
you recognize your platform is what I'm gathering, right? You recognize the privilege of
Yes,
your platform and
the
how,
privilege, thank you. This is a word I should not forget. People would kill me if they knew I forgot the word privilege, but my mom threw me off with the adorable cup of chai. um and my dog. Yeah, I think I tried. I think there's been times where I didn't understand my privilege, and I think like India has been such a beautiful teacher, and I've had great friends, and I've had like, you know, colleagues that have helped me understand, you know, how people think. And maybe this time capsule my parents gave me really didn't equip me for how India is. But I feel like, I've, I've not understood people. I've said things in the past and I've tried my best to learn and relate and understand. And I would hope more NRI people would do that. Cause I think
Yeah.
it's long gone are the days where India is like a place you just like get things for cheap, go home and sell it 10 times the cost. Like that's not really the scene. We have like incredible artisans and incredible designers and performers and writers. And, there's like this whole scene in India where everything is work for hire in music. Where in America, you get your percentages. And if the song gets placed in a film, you get a percentage of like the licensing. And it's not the easiest way to make a living because even in America, we're fighting all kinds of things to be paid more by the streaming services. But in India, that's not even a possibility. So it's like, I see this situation that I benefited from by being in Los Angeles and being around writers that were published. And I want to help make that infrastructure more here. I see that as my calling.
That I love that. And I think that you speak a lot about identity politics. And one question, and I've heard some of your work, a lot of your work, and you have a song, Mia, where you do different vernaculars while you're performing it. And I guess my question is, to you, what does India sound like?
Ooh, that's a great question. What is India? I love India. You're asking a person that's like obsessed with India. It's like the cacophony of sounds. The sound of India. I mean, India sounds like a monsoon with wind chimes and horns and happy people playing on the beach. But I think the sounds of India are evolving, and I think that there's, it's so interesting. Like to come in at 2016, then the pandemic obviously like ate up about 3 years of like what we could do like on ground here. But somehow through that pandemic, I emerged on the other side as like an OG, which has really been a fascinating experience because I'm like, I have not done everything I want to do, but there's this new class of artists that are like more experimental. They're kind of growing up in a place where never have I ever existed when they were in high school. And like the companies are actually investing in independent music. Like during the pandemic, Bollywood figured out that we entertained the people when there was no films coming out. So now they come to the independent music scene for music. Like Karanau did Toba Toba. Like, it's like we're not separated now. And they're finally, whereas only like Yo-Yo Honey Singh may have like experienced crossovers like that before. I feel like there's more longevity. There's more like opportunity in the music scene. And I think even the diaspora, like I think the diaspora has to come and understand how to, interact, because India's music is not like some version of something else now. This is homegrown experience. They have the internet. They're listening to the same stuff you were listening to. Maybe the only thing that'll separate someone from India or someone from LA is access to opportunity. And that's something that I want to change. Like that's something we should all try to change.
Yeah.
But yeah, the music is just going to get better and more diverse and more opportunities, more labels, more music. And I hope more young women get to like make a career out of it. And, it's really what I'm hoping for.
How do we here in India, I guess, how do you hear India in your own work, on your own body of work? And is that something that you do intentionally? Are you trying to bridge cultures? How did you come to that decision? Because I think a lot of folks do it, but I feel like through the course of our conversation, there's such an intention behind a lot of what you do. So I want to get into that intention a little bit. So like, how do you make sure that we hear India in your work?
Oh, I think it's because I want to hear India and everything. Like, it's just like, I think a lot of people talk about like, oh, the NRIs, they grow up far away. But I always encourage people to consider, what would you feel like growing up away from your mother? You would miss your mother. You would crave the sitting in your mother's lap. You would want the home cooking, So it's like, I feel like it's this like homesick, lovesick kind of feeling that I have for India. And like when I'm here, just experiencing it, there's some kind of vibration that I just like can't explain. And I think when it comes to like what I was explaining with my classical dance, that was my world. There was nothing else really made it in there. So when I go to create, I'm pulling from that. You know, like there are influences from living in Los Angeles. Like, you know, like obviously I listened to Tupac, and I remember being young and listening to, you know, watching MTV when there was videos, and like, I know I'm dating myself, but like, you know, I had very American experiences that do color music. Maybe they color my word choice, or maybe I bend into country spaces sometimes because I was exposed to so many melodies like that. But I think for me, I want the world to see India the way that I see it. And I feel like whatever I could see from the West was like, you know, in Slumdog Millionaire, the only person that's like generous is the white man that gives the $100 bill. And like you see us covered in shit. It's not like I'm not trying to talk shit about the movie. The movie did so much for us. And I literally mark it as like a moment where America like literally was like, where is India? And like started to understand us. And like it's a pivotal moment for me, even going after my dreams. But like when people see Bollywood films and they only see like the dancing, it's great. But we have art house films that will like dig into your like psyche and ask you questions about philosophy. And, you know, there's so much here. And, you know, whenever I have like an important moment in the West, I always make sure to wear an Indian designer,
Right.
you know, because I feel like the fashion really is as important as the music and the art, because it's like, it's historical. People from time of Rome have wanted to come and get our textiles and our incense and our spices. And I feel like it's a return to that age. And it's time for us to like be proud of where we're from. We're like decolonizing, I feel, you know, and I feel like that's what my music is supposed to do. It's supposed to be proud of where we come from and not exoticize it. Maybe I was also, you know, I also am guilty of maybe in the beginning of my identity search through music, maybe I did use stereotypes because that was how I related with it. But then I moved here and I really tried to understand why it called me so deeply. And it's because, you know, we're part of a movement that is like, if our parents went for opportunity, it's okay for us to come back and invest in places that we come from, because the world is now looking at India, and all of us have to like be connected, you know?
Yeah, and we talked about this, and I think that conversation stuck with me from last time. And you also told me something very interesting that I would love to see you expand on. You did mention that, you know, as a younger generation evolved with the Indian identity and Indian culture, a lot of the ancient art forms, you're fearful that they might diminish over time. And that's some of the new work you're trying to do. If you can speak on that, because I think it's such a beautiful concept of how you're envisioning something that's so like it's storied, right? There's such a strong history. Anyway, if you can speak on that, I think it would be beautiful.
Yeah, it's something very close to my heart, because I think even though I started my story at my mom, a girl that wanted to learn dance, but for some reason didn't have the ability to learn it at that time, and went on to pursue the American dream and was able to learn the classical dance, you know? I feel like my guru is from an age, you know, she passed away 5 years ago now, and there aren't a lot of people that learned in Puri village or learned from a master, you know, and classical dance is in our Natya Shastras. You know, the Chidambaram temple has 108 karanas, all carved into the stone, which is the different postures. And dance and yoga, and you know, not even yoga is just kind of stripped to its just physical form just for workout, but it's like all of these things together are very important to understand our connection to our body and where we are in time. And I feel like with my guru passing, and even me, like I studied so much in my life, but I feel like I have a drop in the ocean of knowledge of what my guru had. And, you know, I see with the westernization, the globalization, you know, everything becoming smaller, I just see this desire, you know, I feel like sometimes when I'm in India that there's such a desire to like run towards the West and like be like, you know, get this validation, which again, I enjoyed the benefits of that when I came in here. Like I understand that it's part of it, but everybody in the West is holding on as tight as we can to whatever we have left from the East. And it's like, I left Los Angeles just to come back because I wanted to taste turmeric from, you know, this earth. Like I wanted to know if it would make me feel better, if I would find my health, if I would find my center. So basically my hope, my TED talk is that even though I learned classical dance, I turned it into music, right? But it could evolve into my music education programs, or it could evolve into whatever I evolve it into. But I just implore that like one person in every family out of the kids learn a classical art, whether it's playing Carnatic flute or learning Hindustani classical or learning Kathak or Bharatanatyam or Ghatam or Mridangam or anything, Sanskrit, Hindi, Devanagari, whatever it is. It's important that we study it, and we don't have to continue and go on to get a BA in religious studies or South Asian studies like I did and want to devote yourself to studying it. But you can go on to be a doctor, but then you have an appreciation for classical music, and we can pass this appreciation down. We can make sure that there's a desire and a love for it and a way that we can preserve it, because in 50 years, it will literally be gone. If we do not if we don't support the artists that are studying it, like there are classical dancers, and there are people that are putting everything into this art, and maybe they're not going as viral as a TikTok dance, and we as a culture are not, rewarding that, but we should. There should be programs that, have love and support for these arts, because if we lose it in 50 years,
Yeah.
it's
I
just,
mean,
it'll
yeah,
be the biggest thing,
yeah, I think you said it beautifully, because cultural preservation is self-preservation, I guess, at the end of the
It
day.
is.
Yeah.
And we're like have it's an uninterrupted culture. Like from thousands of years ago, we can go back to the same place and find it, and we can be using the same spices and be using the same methods. And it's almost like it's important for us to preserve it for everyone. Like if everyone is now understanding that we do have chi centers and we do have chakras, and emotions are supposed to be expressed, and that they get stored in your body as disease. And if you take these certain, if you drink certain warm water with ginger and like simple things that are here for you, people can better their way of life. And I want that for everyone. So that plea to preserve the culture is for humanity, because we held on. And
Yeah.
now at the end, let us not lose sight. Let us not lose sight right here, when we've gotten so far from the temple sculptures to today. With everything in my heart, I try to put that classical dance in every frame that I can, however I can, to try to inspire. And like my favorite messages are like, hey, my little sister was going to start dance. We were thinking about ballet, but she decided to start Bharatanatyam. And like, to me, I'm like, the future is safe.
Yeah.
This is not a video. This is finally going to be a written piece.
It can be a written piece. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I look like shit for a video interview.
No worries. It should be fine. Yeah. All right. So, Ankur, I know that you have been in the global space for a while, but wanted to kind of see what influences your work, and maybe some of the earliest influences you had that kind of solidified that music was the path for you.
For me, like there was a lot of influence, not only in music, but in the world of art. Like my mom used to direct theater. So like just hanging around those stages, backstages, seeing them make their sets and costumes and rehearse was very exciting for me. Then there was a lot of music playing at home all the time. Some of the music I didn't even know who it was by, I only found out later. Was like with the records you could still find out, but with mixtapes, sometimes they were not labeled. So you know who was singing and who was playing, but all sorts of music from like Hindustani to ghazals to pop to rock to anything. I grew up in a campus, which is a university campus. So there were lots of people coming from different parts of the country, bringing in different kinds of music with them. So just like we were always exposed to different kinds of music and different kinds of cultural activities around us.
And then when did you realize in the process, like this is the industry or this is the space that you wanted to work in and create?
Funnily enough, I always like somewhere at the back of my mind, I always kind of fancied that I'll be a singer and a musician and a songwriter. I had started writing songs in school itself, but I'd never given it a serious thought. till like I reached college, and as I was clearing college, I realized that if I clear college and I did my hotel management, that I'll have to join hotels. And I'm not a kind of a guy who keeps plan Bs. Like I stick to one plan. So I kind of got a little scared that if I join hotels, then what will happen to my music?
Yeah.
So it was a very naive call, if I may say so. It was just like very instinctive. I wouldn't say that I was, like as you read about a lot of people that they were very clear or determined. And I came from a small town, Roorkee, and I was doing my college in Bhopal, and I had never kind of, had a brush with the big bad world till then.
Yeah.
Just putting context to that, yes. So the answer to the question is in college is when I really took that call, but it wasn't a call as if like I'm going to take it head on. I thought it's going to happen within a few months that I'll make it.
Yeah, Ankur, that's funny because my family is in the hospitality space in the US, and got a lot of serious nudging to also go into the space. And then I worked for Intercontinental in London and realized it wasn't my cup of tea at all. So, anyways,
This side of the table is nicer, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, but like I guess that's what kind of creates like the most interesting journey. Just like we have this like bank of experiences, and you kind of realize that we're way more creative than maybe one page. So I think, yeah, it's just nice to hear you also have a similar experience. Uncle, I know you were born in Belgium, and you lived abroad as well. I know you grew up in India. So when did you move back to?
So my father was doing his PhD, so I came back pretty early when I was 3.
Okay.
So and after that, I was in Roorkee.
Okay. I guess my question, so the reason I asked is like, to you, what does India sound like?
Oh, it's interesting because I currently am the creative architect and the producer for Coke Studio Bharat, and which is pretty much what we answer there is what does India sound like, and which was a difficult thing to answer in the beginning, and it took us time to figure that out. Not that we have figured it out, but we're still in the process of understanding it, because unlike other countries, we are quite a diverse nation, and it is difficult to encapsulate it in just one sonic space or one sonic thing. And also, we are the youngest kind of country in the world.
Right.
So it is, there are many different Indias that exist within the idea of India.
Right.
And to encapsulate it in sound, I would say you can take an example of how we have a thali here, which is a very unique thing. The different things that go with each other and kind of make sense together. Individually, they would form a completely different story, but they kind of make sense together as well. So when you have a thali, sometimes you have something sweet going along with something salty and bitter. But individually they would form a completely different story. But when you have it together, they sit in different parts of your tongue and form a complete story. So similarly, the sound of India is like a thali. It's very beautifully integrated together. It won't, if you would just randomly see all these pieces from a distance, it would seem like chaos. But once you dive into it, you realize there's a sense of harmony, or how each of the elements exist with each other is kind of very beautiful. It's like a natural forest, you can't grow a forest. So it's like how there are different kinds of trees and a whole ecosystem and animals living around each other and supporting each other and feeding off each other and getting happy with each other, getting upset with each other. But the ecosystem completely goes for a toss if you take one element out.
And when you look at your own work, Ankur, do you hear India in your own work?
I don't hear India, I hear me, and I am India. So I, in a way, yes, I'm never kind of even in my life, I've never kind of given a lot of attention to the big picture. I'm aware of the big picture, but it's always for me about the instant, the moment here. And like, that's why when you were asking me about my journey, it seems different from what it is actually. It's kind of a domino life. Like one thing leads to another, and you don't know where it's going to take you. So
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I think it's very interesting. Like when I talk to people abroad and I ask them about South Asian music artists and I ask them to describe what they think it sounds like, your work necessarily isn't the type of work that they're describing, right? I think there is a stereotyped sort of sound of India, whether it's the flute. I mean, it's romanticized, right? It's orientalized in a way. And I guess do you think that young India's music still balances culture or these sort of world-known adjectives that are prescribed? Or do you think that, modern day India is actually completely sitting on a global stage? Like, do you think
I
there's
mean,
a balance that happens?
India was always in the global stage, according to me. It's just that, like, even when you sometimes, I finish my gigs, I've just done a live performance. I come off stage, some people who've liked the performance come and see you, and they start describing your songs to you. And you realize that their description doesn't exactly match with why you had written the song or what was the genesis of the song, which makes you realize that everyone is trying to see their own story in the story that they're experiencing. So when you say the Western world has a romanticized version of India, is that they probably are missing that romance somewhere and they want to seek that romance in India. So they are trying to see their own story in our story. We have a story, which is a very strong story, which is, and it's not just the Westerners. Like you would meet somebody rooted in our country, from our country, and play certain kind of music to them, and they probably will not say that this is Indian, but not realizing that like it is Indian because it's come from here and it has come from what we have experienced. As you hear so many people in India, young artists, and I don't mean to say just from cities, from small towns, from villages, singing in different languages, singing in global languages, using global sounds. The idea of a country is not the political boundaries anymore.
Right.
The World Wide Web has completely redefined the idea of countries, nations, and people. It's just that we're trying to cling on to an idea of a nation within a political boundary. It exists as a concept, but it is not the only concept. Today, people are experiencing everything. With the internet, they were experiencing places that probably they will never visit. Now with AI, probably they're experiencing even more and a different universe altogether, which is what we may call an unreal universe. But in the near future, that might become an alternate universe and probably the only real universe at some point.
Would you call yourself a philosopher? Like, do you like spend a lot of time thinking about? Because I feel like this is like super deep. Like what you're talking about is like almost philosophical in nature, right?
I mean, I wouldn't call myself a philosopher because I don't engage in it in depth and research and try and put a paper out or try and put a theory out. I use these tools to write my songs. So I am a songwriter, and as a songwriter, there are voices in your head that talk to each other and try and make sense of certain chaos in front of you. So you're in constant conversation with you, yourself, and friends and other people you meet. Whether you meet writers, poets, singers, musicians, journalists, you can constantly engage with them and try and find fodder to write songs, because we are kind of, when you're writing songs, and I come from an independent space mostly with my work, and there you're not doing a commission project, you're kind of documenting your life. So it's like you are constantly in the process of writing your own autobiography. So it is, you engage in these conversations and you discuss them, but I wouldn't call myself a philosopher, because that is something much more serious. People who have dedicated their time, life, and to the thing, and then it has resulted in something substantial, which is more than a song.
You said that there's like conversation with many different voices that you have in your head. Um, how large is the conversation that you have with the identity voice, or like the fact that you're a South Asian artist? Like what does that conversation look like? Like, do you feel like your identity, obviously you're talking about writing an autobiography, right? So obviously it's a part of it, but walk me through what that conversation looks like in your head a little bit.
So identity wise, like fortunately or unfortunately, uh, I haven't had many question marks there. I'm kind of quite rooted in our country. I've spent like almost all my life in my country. I have lived in different cities, in which I've lived in Bombay the most now. But to say that I am one person is not correct. Like, I hope I'm not sounding like a serial killer, but it is you are different people for different people. You are different for yourself. You're different for the people you meet. Different people you meet, you are different people. Uh, I think it's a very subcontinental thing, I assume, in which we uh, like I'll talk about two things. Like, you notice a lot of times when in India, when people travel outside India, they get an accent, or they come back, they get an accent. I find it a very interesting phenomena. Other phenomena is just when we mess up, we smile after that. Like, if you spilled something, you say, "Oh, arey, ho gaya, ye sab ho gaya." Like, so it is. I find these two phenomena amazing, and I feel it has got to do with what we are culturally. We. I'm not sure if I'm 100% right about this, but my theory on this, that's why I said I'm not a philosopher, but my theory on this is that it's important for us to make the person we're engaging with comfortable. So whether it's the sabzi wala where you're buying your vegetables, suddenly like I sometimes find myself talking in a Bombay accent. Or the rickshaw wala, I'll be starting talking in a Bombay accent, whereas if I would probably be talking to a British person, I would be making sure that I'm using phrases that they understand. Subconsciously, we are that, is what I feel, is that we want to make sure that whoever we're engaging with, we're making them comfortable. Like when we say Atiti Devo Bhava, is like we really make our guests feel like they're gods coming from the hospitality segment. Again, it's like, if we really mean it, we want to make you feel that you're welcome, you're comfortable, and that extends to not just the place, but that also extends to interactions where you talk to other people. You want to make them comfortable and want to make them feel at home. The kind of, I would use the word aggression, or the kind of confidence, maybe. I don't know. English is not my first language, so I don't know if these are the right adjectives, but you see with other parts of the country this, that they don't care whether the other person gets you or not. We do care. Is it a new thing? Is it an old thing? A philosopher or an anthropologist can shed light on this better. But I find this phenomena interesting. I find this thing interesting. And same thing of like how we as a developing nation, after 200 years of colonization, emerging from that as a young country, trying to be comfortable with mistakes, is something which I find very interesting. It's like, you spill milk and suddenly a smile comes to you. Like, like this, the tilt of the head and the smile. I think it says a lot. Is that okay? Now we can fuck up. It's okay to fuck up. Like, we do mess up. So I find these two things kind of very interesting, as when you talk about identity. I am these things as well. Right. So So in terms of identity, I try and understand why I behave like this. Why do North Indians behave a certain way and South Indians behave a certain way, and people from the east of our country behave a certain, people from the west behave a certain way. It's got a lot to do with generations that has come before, generations that have gone through partition, generations that have been removed from the idea of partition, the way that people from a certain region in the country are better in business than people in certain region. Women play a different role in certain part of the country than how women play a role in a different part of the country. It's all very different, yet it is all of us. So these conversations do happen in my mind in terms of identity of who I am. But because we are so diverse, you try and find your story in the story when you travel outside India and you meet other people, and then you kind of, oh, this guy is more like a South Indian, or this guy is like like maybe a Bengali, or like this guy is more like a Punjabi, like when I went to America, I found a lot of Americans were like Punjabis, like America, who have nothing to do with South Asia. They behave like Punjabis. So in my head, oh yeah, like these guys are Punjabis, or like if you go to France, you would say, oh, these guys are Bengalis, so it kind of, you kind of find your story in their story as they find their story in your story.
Yeah, so it's almost reciprocal in a way, right? It's like we're growing together, or like we're trying to find a shared experience in a way.
I feel like I feel like at the end of the day, I read it like, in school. I remember in social sciences, there used to be a thing that man is a social animal. I love that line,
Yeah.
and I love that idea is that it's like howsoever you want to tell yourself that you should be okay in solitude, you are a social animal. That's the genesis of Homo sapiens, is that we tell stories and we use stories to bring people together, and that's who we are at the end of the day.
And obviously, I know you mentioned this a little bit, but I'm assuming that for you, music is a way of storytelling.
Absolutely, it is like I feel it is kind of way of bringing people together through stories, and making one feel less lonely.
You mentioned that you're writing your autobiography through your work. How does that feel? Like, does that feel like you're putting so much of yourself out there for the world? How do you hold on to what's precious and maybe not for the world, maybe for you? What's that process like?
So two things. I don't think I'm writing an autobiography. I'll correct myself there. I'm time stamping myself through my life. So I'm not expressing everything that is there. Secondly, I'm writing songs, so poetry can be a little vague. So it's not as straight as, non-fiction or fiction, where you straight away understand everything, or maybe get close to the layers. Poetry is a little more layered. So you're not really putting everything out there. You're putting your feelings out there, but you're not really putting your feelings out there. It's almost like, I remember in school, I had this moment when I realized that I could hide my secrets in my songs. So it was a very precious moment for me. So I still end up doing that. I don't need to tell it, but I can be cheeky by just putting it out there. That is there.
Uncle, I love that line. I hide my secrets in my song. That's beautiful. I'm gonna go back to the identity bit a little bit. In terms of like when you go abroad, I know you were performing at the Oscars and you were in LA with Shruti. Do you feel, and I know that you were surrounded by the community, so it might have been a different experience, but like when you talk to people that are not necessarily from the diasporic South Asia or not South Asian, do you find that South Asians in music are misrepresented or underrepresented, or do you think that the representation is there?
It's underrepresented would be a right word. I feel that we're still kind of not claiming the world as our own. We are still, like, I had a very interesting conversation with a South Asian artist manager yesterday, and I was talking to her and asking her, what are you working on with a very amazing South Asian artists who I kind of heard when I was on my US tour, and they were talking about how Desis feel, and we wanted to talk about a song, how Desis feel this, how Desis do this, how Desis do that, and I kind of had a question mark there. Is like there was this need to affirm your identity, which I understand where it's coming from, but when you're confident about your identity, you don't need to affirm your identity because you are who you are. Nobody can take that away from you. And I feel we will find a space is when we talk to the world with confidence about our identity and not talking about our identity and trying to prove our identity. We will not include a sarangi or a tabla or a tumbi in a song because we are South Asian. We will do whatever the hell we want to do.
Right.
And I know these extra things that probably you are not exposed to, and I'll use it in the way I want to use it if and when it applies.
Right.
Is what I mean. Like, I don't know if it's making sense.
I
feel
does.
like
Because
I feel that sort of thing in the music industry at least is that we see a moment that the world is ours. We identify that we have been kind of denied our position in this world. We see it as a fact that the power dynamic in most of the important places that define who you are is not, our representation is not enough there. But I see myself definitely as a global citizen.
Right.
And I want to talk about global stories, global ideas, in languages that the world understands, and also flavored with my own language. I sing in primarily Hindustani, so it's a mix of Hindi and Urdu. But for instance, when I was doing my US tour, I realized that everybody might not understand these songs. So I just made sure that the banter in the middle is in English and it's not but I didn't change my songs to English. I did a cover version of a few songs in English songs, but I did them in Hindustani. So I played a cover of Imagine, but I made a Hindustani version of it. My friend Swanand and I, we wrote this cover of Imagine. And the idea was not to sing it in English. The idea was to sing it in Hindustani, but give them a flavor. Okay, we know about your music as well.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, you're a global citizen. You don't necessarily think that there needs to be anything proved to the international world. And I like that because I find myself sometimes on the opposite spectrum, where like when I talk to people about luxury goods, now I'm in the handbag fashion space. India rarely comes on the top of the list, right? I mean, you look at a luxury leather handbag or leather messenger, whatever, it's always Italy, France. You have these European countries that dominate that conversation. So for me, I get on the defensive, right? So I'm like trying to now say, listen, like India does, I mean, we have been doing luxury for millennia, like all embroidery, all the luxury brands are still doing all the embroideries in India. So like it's come from this space. But do you think the evolution of music has seen a similar trajectory where now it's caught up and maybe you don't need to prove, like where does your thought for not wanting to not wanting to prove, but like you don't think that it needs to be proven, like where does that stem from? The fact that I know that India has always been international, but I'm just trying to see, like, I don't know if my question makes sense. It's like something that I just thought of right now because I feel like I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum.
It is. I feel like you need to work at home. Like Mahatma Gandhi had said, think local, act global, right? So I really believe in that. You need to make an impact in your lane. You need to make an impact in your village. You need to make an impact in your surroundings. You need to make an impact in your crew, then it can expand to bigger. And then eventually, if you're very good at that, then you will automatically make an impact on the world. You can't set out to make an impact on the world. Is what I feel. You just need to be confident where you are and do what you are in the place you are doing it. Like if you don't prove yourself there and you're not understood there is no point of proving it to the world, because you are operating there. So like as I say, that the structure of the atom and the structure of the solar system is the same. So you need to just need to concentrate on the atom, and it will have an effect on the whole solar system. And that is a fact, proven again and again. What I see happening is that there is an interest in impacting the solar system. So you start neglecting what's happening in the atom. And that system falls apart. So you just need to be impactful with your work, and you need to be impactful with your work exactly where you are, but keeping an eye out there in the universe and not rejecting that idea that belongs to you as well. Like when Krishna's mother had opened his mouth, she'd seen the whole universe inside his mouth. And I feel like our mythology keeps on reflecting that very interestingly. And I love those stories from a mythology which kind of give you your crutches when you're drowning. Like, like it really helps you walk when you are really hurt. And these stories make you understand that, yes, like you need to just the universe is inside you. You are there. You are the universe. You are the most important person. There's no point of trying to make an impact on the globe if you're not impacting yourself and then your immediate circle. So I see that because there is this spotlight on South Asia at the moment in a way, and I feel mainly because it's going to become an interesting market, which is it's like linked to the industrial revolution of like it's mass production and money market. That spotlight is turning on India right now. So because of that, they are giving you more importance. But you need to have an impact here. If you're not making an impact in your lane, there is no point.
Yeah. Ankur, this was amazing. I had a few more questions, but I'm not going to ask you because I want to end it at that. It's profound.
No, you can go for it if you want. Like I can answer more questions.
I was going to ask you about your fashion sensibility and where your sense of style comes from. So if you want to answer that.
That comes from Pratna.
Okay. Does she style you? Does she tell you what to wear and all that sort of jazz?
Yeah, a lot of times, like for my shoots and all, and I like even if I'm going for some event or something, I'll just quickly wear something, put something together, and I'll call her, check with her, and then she tells me, okay, now I think change the shoes or like,
Amazing.
So she has a very good sense of style, and she is a major influence when it comes to my style.
Awesome. So Ankur, thank you so much. I know I've taken up 30 minutes of your time.